The mashing process. Did you have a steel smasher?
We did, yeah. We had two mash tuns at Young's. Each of them was about 8 tons of barley could squeeze into them. Both stainless steel mash tuns with these lovely stainless steels mashers. And it was the job in the morning because there were two mash tuns. Basically, there'd be the mashing brewer would go in and operate one mash tun, and the brewhouse foreman would operate the second mash tun. And it was a case of we had to open the hot and cold liquor taps to get the right blend. There was a thermometer there to get the right temperature. And then we would turn a big black wheel that would open a slide to let the barley or malted barley fall out of the grist case into the steel masher. It would go through and splosh into the mash tun. And we had the ideal rate to mash at, which was obviously in pounds per barrel. And at the end of the mashing process, by looking at the volume of barrels of liquor in there, we could see in hindsight how close we were to the ideal thickness of the mash. And you do it by eye, basically. And there was a competition between the head brewer, the mashing brewer, and the foreman of the brew house to see who can get closest to this desired number. And it was a 10 pence bet when I started in 88. It was principle more than money, of course. And we both put our 10 pence pieces on the desk near the mash tuns, and the winner would take the 20 pence. And there was an absolute uproar after about 10 years when the brewhouse foreman upped it to 20 pence stake rather than 10 pence. But I like to think I won more than I lost over that time. It was a lot of fun, actually, yeah.
Did the mash tuns have internal rakes?
No, no. Although we used to brew good lager at Young's, these are traditional mash tuns, so there was no rakes. The only thing in the mash tun, apart from the sparge arms, of course, was a very slender bar at the bottom that used to rotate after the mash and would sweep out the grain automatically, very, very slowly. But no, there was no rakes.
So you didn't underlet them?
We did underlet.
All right.
Yes. Oh, we underletted, yes. I think it was about 20 barrels after half an hour stand, we'd do an underlet.
And that would raise the temperature of the mash, presumably.
It did a bit, yes, but primarily we wanted to get that mash away from the mash tun plates to make sure there's no risk of the mash sort of sticking on the plates and blocking the workflow.
Okay. And so after you'd underlet, then what? That you'd stand for how long?
It was half an hour stand, and then we'd leave it another half an hour, and then we'd start sparging. So the mash was actually in the mash tuns for a full hour in total.
Okay, that's quite short.
Yeah, we always use Maris Otter barley for our ales, which is actually pretty well modified, pretty much already. So it doesn't need that long to mash.
Okay. And sparging, how many sparges would you do?
It was a constant sparge. I can't think of the rate. It was probably something like about oh golly, 3 barrels a quarter, I would guess. But yeah, it was just constant sparging. And we'd work out the volume to sparge, and as soon as we'd come to that volume, they would turn the sparge off and then slowly drain the mash tun down.
Okay. And you wouldn't take any return warts then?
No, don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a thing of the past really now. Uh, and you were mentioning about brewing lager. How different was the lager brewing process?
Well, it was always quite amusing that we brewed it pretty much, as an ale in these old mash tuns, and it worked pretty well. Yeah, we had some, pretty good quality lager malt. We used to get some decent hops in, and we ended up winning quite a few gold medals for our lager. We always got told off by the board, of course, because we're supposed to be a cask ale brewery, not a lager brewery.
And I guess you weren't decocting the lager then.
No, no, it's a one-off mash at a set temperature, and then we would just we'd run that off. I'm guessing it was probably fairly well modified malt, thinking back about it at the time.
And what temperature did you ferment the lager at?
Oh. That's too long ago, I'm afraid. So I no idea at all.
I mean, was it fermented cold?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes. We did have lager fermenting conicals. So we had, I think it was seven small conicals and eight enormous double-sized conicals. So we could brew 300 barrels of lager at a time. And then we'd often blend two of the smaller conicals into one 600 barrel conical for the lagering maturation period.
Were you brewing a lot of lager?
Not a great deal. I mean, although we won quite a few gold medals for our lager, we were obviously primarily a cask ale brewery. So I would think that maybe one brew in 10 might have been a lager.
Okay, and was that just for your own pubs?
As much as I knew, yeah.
And were any other beers being kegged other than the lager?
Yeah, we used to produce quite a few keg beers. I mean, certainly things like the bitter we made, or Young's Pale Ale. We used to make a keg version of that, which was very popular in smaller clubs, which couldn't have the turnover to actually empty a cask in time. We would do ramrod into kegs. And then, of course, towards the end, we started doing a lot of oatmeal stouts and chocolate stout into kegs.
Okay, because I mean, ramrod, that was basically the same as special, wasn't it?
It was. Traditionally, it was brewed a little bit stronger than the special, but it was the same pretty much recipe, the same blend of Maris Otter and Crystal, and the same Goldings and Foggles hops.
And the Young's bitter that was kegged, was that exactly the same beer as the cask version?
Pretty much so. Yeah, absolutely right.
And speaking of pubs, did the brewing team have much contact with the pub side of the trade?
I think, yeah, quite a lot. Um, Before my time, there's a lovely story that all the brewers at lunchtime would go to our sample room, and they'd be in the sample room, knocking back the beers and chatting about different things in the brewery. And on one occasion, they turned up the sample room and found a big shiny padlock on the sample room door. And it was absolutely outrageous. They were all shouting, who on earth would dare to lock the sample room door? Who's done this terrible thing to us? It turned out to be the chairman. And of course, John Young, our chairman, when he was asked about it, apparently he barked out, "We've got 135 sample rooms across London. Go and damn well use those. Stop using your own sample room." And he was absolutely right. It's really, really important, I think, for a brewer to get out into the trade and to taste the beer as the public are tasting their beer. It's all very well being in your sample room in your ivory tower and tasting superb beer every day, but it's important to get to the pubs because that's what the public taste it. So yeah, we'd love to go to the pubs for lunch and we would chat with the customers, we'll drink the beer. Anything wrong with it, of course, we would get back to the manager and tell them, this needs changing. So it was a very good idea to get us out there.
So was that mostly just the pub on the corner?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. For lunchtime, we would go to one of the nearest two or three pubs, and we used to alternate because we had quite a few. We had the King's Arms, we've got the Grapes, we've got the Spread Eagle, and the Brewery Tap, and it was easy to get to those. But we always made an effort as a brewing team to get out and about to all the pubs across London and Surrey whenever we could. And it was great because we had, company cars and the company petrol allowance, and we can claim back the petrol for driving to a pub, for a quality test. And also in those days, you had to monitor your company mileage for a company car. And most of my mileage was actually done driving to Young's pubs to do spot checks on the beer, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
And how was the beer in general?
Yeah, I think it was really, really good. We also employed a guy called Ian Swanson, who was our quality brewer, and his job was to spend his entire time at Young's actually out in the pubs. And he would do spot raids and dawn raids, and he would find things in their cellar that shouldn't be in their cellar, which he would pour down the drain. But yeah, he was always advising pubs how to improve quality, how to improve their cleaning schedules. So yeah, we got really good towards the end.
And do you think the beer's different now it's all being brewed at Marstons?
Well, it's a Marstons now, but of course it's had quite a journey. I mean, it started out in Charles Wells. I think went to Marstons, of course, then Witchwood, and then Banks. and now back at Marstons. And yeah, it has changed each time it's moving around. Not surprisingly, flavour matching a beer is really, really difficult. I mean, at Young's, we brewed lots of contract beers, and it's very difficult to get the flavour perfect. But yeah, it's changed a bit, but people tell me it's more consistent nowadays. Not if it's true or not, but yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. So, interesting. But because I mean, it's not the full range brewed anymore because Ramrod isn't made anymore, is it?
No. Well, when Young's shut the brewery, they retained what they call the Big Six, so the license for their six main beers. So yeah, the Ramrod, I think it was Winter Warmer, Bitter, Special, and another couple. And these were their key things, which then got brewed under license. The other beers, I think, got sold off, and some of them, of course, had disappeared completely.
Yeah. So is the Winter Warmer still brewed?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah. Yes, it tends to vary every single year. There's good and bad years, but yeah, they still make it.
Because that's a really, I mean, it's ironic now that it'd be being brewed in Burton, given that it was originally called Burton.
It was, yeah, good memory. Absolutely right. Yes.
So, well, it's the last London Burton. It's a style which seems to have been completely forgotten in just a couple of decades. It's just really odd, the history of Burton. So, yeah. So anyway, how did you get to be the person who carried on brewing and the Wandsworth site?
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, Young's obviously shut the brewery, and they announced they were going to close the brewery on my birthday. They announced on my birthday they're going to shut the brewery later that summer, which of course was a bit of a shock for me. It ruined my birthday, it ruined my career, and it became a sort of a deeply personal thing from that point onwards. But this was the UK's longest brewing site back in that time, and Youngs were very, very proud of this fact. They had a book called Britain's Oldest Brewery written about it. But I thought it was heritage that was well worth trying to save, to keep it going. So myself and Derek Prentice, another brewer at Young's, approached Young's back in 2006 and said we wanted to get some sort of brewery going when Young's finished. And we found out that Young's had a power of veto on the site and they could control any business on that site for 10 years after they'd left. And they made it quite clear they didn't really want us to do any brewing on the site. So that fell through straight away. And luckily, a few months later, when Young's was still brewing, I met the developer, a company called Minerva. And I said to Minerva that I'd already spoken to the council and they were going to insist that Minerva opened a brewery at some point on the site in the future. I said, in which case, that would be London's newest brewery to replace Britain's oldest brewery. So I suggested to them that if I built a little tiny scrap heap challenge brewery, I could do a token brew every single week until they opened their commercial brewery, in which case they would keep the badge of the UK's longest brewing site. And of course, they thought it was a great idea. So they offered me a job as site manager once Young's moved out. So I would occupy the site, do some administration, health and safety, that sort of thing, do tours, but also keep the brewing going. That was always the plan. Yeah, Young's employed me as health and safety advisor for decommissioning, and we were working in liaison with the scrap merchants. So we were surrounded by bits of stainless steel. So the kettle was the old tea urn from the canteen, which we sort of embellished ever so slightly, put some insulation around it, decent valve, a level glass. The fermenting vessel was a trap filter, which we chopped in half, took all the insides out, and then fitted some cooling coils inside it. Um, the mash tun was the old reservoir, it's a little container in the bottling line, and it was what we used to decant the partly filled bottles into. So it was a stainless steel container, and we would poke the bottles through holes in the top. And once it was filled to the top, all that blend would get pasteurized and then mixed into large quantities of light ale and that sort of thing. So to make it from a reservoir into a mash tun, more insulation, sort of sight glass, big valve, and Yeah, it was all thrown together in 9 days, actually, but it was a bit of fun.
And what beers were you brewing on that?
So to start with, we, we couldn't sell the beer. So as a result of that, we couldn't really make any money on the beer. So it was down to three of us spending our own money to buy the malt and the hops to actually produce the beer. And just to make it as cheap as possible, if we had two or three varieties of hops, we'd be paying a lot of money for hops that might go off. So I was just using pale ale malt, I was using Crystal and Goldings hops. It's a very, very simple mix, and I would make a beer called Phoenix, a 4.3% pale ale out of those ingredients. And then once in a while, I might go to Sainsbury's and buy something exotic. For example, I bought some ginger on one occasion, some root ginger, and I came back and made a ginger beer. But of course, just using again malt, pale ale malt, crystal, and Goldings with some ginger. And on one occasion, some good friends at By the Horns Brewery actually donated me half a bag of chocolate malt and said, play with that. So I had lots of fun and I got a lot of donations over the years. A lot of good friends in the industry would give me, half a bag of hops here or there. So I did quite well in the end.
And did you ever go over to selling that beer?
No, the veto for the commercial side of it was 10 years. So until 2016, we couldn't sell a single pint. And in 2016, by this point, the site was owned by a company called Greenland, another developer. And they said to me, great, we can start selling beer now. How about it? But I explained to them that my beer was brewed on a very small scale, which made it really inefficient cost-wise. And to sell it, it would never actually pay for itself. And so it's much easier to keep on going the way we're going. Because by that point, we were surviving on donations. We had people who would come into the brewery for different reasons. They'd be an honesty box and they put money into it. And we actually survived on donations for 14 years.
All right. And so are you still using that system?
Yes, when I joined Sandbrook's Brewery joined this site in about 2020. And of course, I assumed at the time I would get my scrap heap challenge and stick it in the museum as sort of part of history. But Duncan Sandbrook had a much better idea. He said it was far more valuable to Sandbrook's using it as a pilot brewery test kit. And also, he said I could use it for something called Brewer for the Day, where we charge people to come in and brew with me for a day on this ramshackle old kit, which is working quite well. It's quite a useful income now.
And how often do you do that?
Twice a week. We've only got two fermenting vessels, two small fermenting vessels, so we can't brew more than twice a week because the beer has to be in the vessels for about a week or so.
And what sorts of beers are you brewing? Just anything that the person who's brewing for the day wants to brew.
Not exactly. Unfortunately, most of my beers are pre-allocated. For example, a lot of beer festivals are taking my beer. A few local pubs take my beer. And also I do heritage tours on the site. And for the heritage tours, I brew really old-fashioned styles of beer, which we can't do on the main kit because it wouldn't sell in today's pubs. So I brew bespoke beers just for my own heritage tours.
Okay. And what sort of beers are those?
Oh, massively varied. The thing is that, of course, now I've got access to all of the Sandbrook's malt and hops, so I can brew a different beer every day of the year. I think, and still not to run out of ideas. So it's quite good, really. So recently, I brewed a braggot with lots of lovely honey. I brewed an oatmeal stout last week. Before then, an IPA, English IPA, of course. So yeah, very, very varied.
And so you're still happy doing that?
I love it.
Yeah, I suppose it's you've got a lot of independence, I would guess.
Yeah, I am very lucky because yeah, I'm just allowed to get on with what I want to do on that small brewery. Obviously, I'm not employed to make beer as such. I'm health and safety advisor. I do a bit of maintenance, a bit of little bit of plumbing. So I'm jack of all trades. So my brewing is very much a very small sideline to my job here.
And so are you doing things in the museum as well?
Yeah, well, I look after the museum and I run the tours here. We also do tours followed by a tasting, and that's probably my main job. That's where the money comes from.
And how often are you doing that a week?
Not that often. We're still quite a new business, and we're just hoping that, as people hear about us, word will travel and they get busier and busier. But at the moment, we're doing scheduled tours at least twice a month. We're doing t tour and tastings at least once a month, and we have other bespoke companies, things like Buy Gift and Methodist Day and Virgin, who also book bespoke tours, which I then run for them as well.
Okay, and what are the beers that you'll have in the tastings?
Uh, it really varies. I'll go into the pub and I'll think, where are six, good varied beers, which I can, taste people, let people taste. But also during the tour, I'm actually quite crafty and I try to get a feel of the sort of beers those people like. So I try to pick six beers suitable for the group who come on the tour.
Okay, and there'll be Sandbrook's beers.
Oh, indeed, yeah. I mean, once in a while, I might have a guest beer on, but whatever I think is the best selection that day, really.
Okay. Um, and one thing I wanted to ask you about Young's. Was Young's a wet brewery when you were working there?
We, I believe, were the last wet brewery in the country.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
And when did that end?
It didn't. No, it didn't.
It didn't.
No,
All
it
right.
was marvelous. It was right. So, yeah, for your viewers, a wet brewery, you drink what you like on the site, but you don't take it off the site. And for a dry brewery, you can't drink at work, but you get an allowance to take home at weekends. And the number of wet breweries reduced over the years with health and safety coming in. But we stood by our principles and kept it as a wet brewery. So all the shop floor workers got an allowance of 2 quarts per day, which is 4 pints basically. And they had a 4 pint jug, which they would have filled up in the morning, a little room called the Fiddle. It was fresh cask beer. They'd take their jug in there, get filled to the top, and they would spend the rest of the day swigging this jug. Of course, a few of the employees used to actually trade these jugs with each other, and some of them had a lot more than 4 pints a day. But once you got to foreman level, there was a ceremony where you were given the key to the sample room, which meant you could go and use a sample room beer whenever you wanted. And that became the way we were run. It's wonderful.
Yeah, because the only brewery I worked in was the former Halls Brewery, a Courage Brewery in Newark-on-Trent. And I
Oh yeah.
worked there for a few weeks in 75. And that was a totally wet brewery. There was just this cellar. You had your breaks in and you could drink as much as you wanted.
Yeah.
And the people who'd been working there a while, they'd be drinking 4 pints in each break. They'd be getting through at least a gallon a day and then going and operating the heavy machinery. Yeah, a different world.
Yeah, yeah, it was great fun at the time. Looking back on it, maybe not a good idea.
Yeah. And so do you still go drinking in Young's pubs?
Um, I do. I like to do that very much so. But the problem is squeezing it in because we work quite a few out. Everybody running a microbrewery knows it's very difficult. You've got to work, quite long hours to actually make it all pay for itself. So I don't go out that often, but every Christmas, the Old Young's production department get together to do a Christmas pub crawl. They call it the Brewers Walk, and we still do it around Wandsworth. And we met up before Christmas last year and did quite a few Young's pubs. Had a great time.
So does Derek go on that?
He does indeed.
Yeah, I could imagine Derek would.
Yeah, we had 14 of us last time on the last Brewers Walk, so it's
Well, that's
good.
quite impressive.
Yeah, people love coming back to Wandsworth.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's got its own atmosphere, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's great. Bit of history here.
Well, I think I've gone through pretty much everything I've got on my list here. Um, well, thank you very much for talking with me. It's been very interesting, very useful. I hope people will enjoy it. And yeah,
Can I leave you one story?
yeah, yeah, go, please.
You mentioned lager earlier.
Oh yeah,
And Young's were famous for producing a beer called Saxon Lager back in 1972. And this was done basically using an old mash tun. And I understand they used ordinary ale malt, um, lightly roasted, probably used ale yeast as well. So it's really not a proper lager. And it became known as the worst lager in the world. And of course, this is before I came to Young's. And in 1988, I came to Young's. And my mentor was a guy here called Barry John, one of the older Young's brewers. And I remember at one brewing function, I was there in my dinner jacket with Barry John, hobnobbing, and it was all very exciting. And then I noticed this old grumpy man came stomping up. He looked at Barry John and he went, here, he went, you're one of those gits who made that Saxon lager, aren't you? And I was horrified at this old man being so rude. So Barry John, the brewer, sort of looked down at him and said, well, said to myself, Chappie, it's a long time ago. He said, let bygones be bygones, won't you? And this old guy went, a long time ago, so was Hitler.
Yeah,
So that's how bad Saxon was.
someone with a long memory, obviously the guy. Yeah. Well, well, thank you very much. It's a good story to end on.